What is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another episode of the Kingdom Says podcast. I am your host, as always, Garrett Williams, and I am joined by my two usual co-hosts. First off, making his return, Arrowhead Tom to my left, your right. Tom, how are we doing today, sir?
Oh, I am back from the dead and or just being too busy in general. I am not I'm coherent and aware fully control of all my faculties.
Today you are, friend. Today you are.
Versus maybe some
No Britney Spears here at the moment. No.
Yes. I've assured them that I will not sing, and I am wearing clothes, so I think we're in good shape, boys.
Program.
So, but I'm good.
No graham crackers. No graham crackers. For those of you confused by this intro,
graham crackers.
For those of you confused by this intro, you might check our socials. There might be some explanation later.
Yeah. Also join us, of course, Kyle Henning. Kyle, how are we doing tonight, sir?
It's good. It's we were gonna get together and do this last night, and then it got a little later, and then things got a little weirder and wonkier and goofier, and Tom didn't feel very good, so we pushed it to today.
Great.
Oh, I mean, phrase that. Tom felt fine.
Tom
felt fantastic, as a matter of fact. But probably wouldn't have been conducive to content for you guys, so we decided to postpone that to today. That's a different kind of content. But
would have been good content.
It's going to give you, and again, you're going to get content out of it because we're probably going to show you what happened a little bit behind the scenes here at some point. But no, it's time to talk about this roster and now the practice squad that is bigger than the practice squad's supposed to be, because there's certain guys that haven't cleared physicals yet and all this other stuff they're going to do and move, and we're nowhere near done, but the initial 53 is out and done, and now we've got even a little bit of an adjusted 53, so we'll go through kind of all of that with you guys tonight, which is going to be a good time. And then, guys, we're like 7 days from the opener. By the time y'all are hearing this, we're basically a 1 week away from the opener.
1 week out, yeah. It will be exactly that.
Beautiful thing.
Very exciting time.
Meaningful football.
Hopefully, we see a lot of familiar faces next Thursday, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, we'll see a lot of familiar faces. It's just a matter of will we see every familiar face that we're supposed to.
Particular familiar faces, yeah.
Very large, very
dominant guy.
Well, so I guess we can
will talk about it. Yeah. So let's dive into this 53-man roster here. Obviously, like Kyle said yesterday, which if you're listening 2 days ago, probably Tuesday, big cut down day around the whole entire NFL. You know, very very tough day for a lot of folks. But you know, the Chiefs have come to a initial 53-man roster for sure, starting with the quarterback position, which was probably one of the bigger surprises of the day. The Chiefs only keeping two quarterbacks in Blaine Gabbert and Patrick Mahomes, of course, cutting Shane Buechele and Chris Oladokun, and then re-signing only one of those guys to the practice squad, that being Chris Oladokun, not Shane Buechele, which was a very surprising learn today. How we feel about the quarterbacks. They didn't take advantage of the new 53-man, third quarterback rule type thing that they got going on. At least not yet. You know, who knows how things will go. But initially, it does not seem like they're going to roll with Shane Buechele.
I'm surprised that they didn't take advantage of the new rule, frankly. Talked about it a bunch, just based on how they typically operate when there's roster rule manipulation, availability, and stuff like that. They try to take advantage of those things as much as they can. I know Shane didn't have a great game against Cleveland. I know it wasn't fantastic. Juan kind of baited him and cheated him a little bit because he knows him. So,
thanks for that.
That didn't help. But I was a little surprised that they cut it and didn't take three. And then I think probably the reason that you don't see him on the Chiefs roster on the practice squad or anything is because there's other teams that have had interest in him. They tried to trade him. Like, there's been multiple reports they tried to trade him, and that there was interest, but it's not.
Yeah.
They know you're kind of in a box there. Like I said, the way that this was the first thing in a list of things that was different about how they built this roster, the initial 53-man roster this year, that's different than they've done things in the past in a lot of ways. And it was just the first of many. But it definitely changed once they did that. Once we saw that, and the way that the news kind of broke out, it came out in swings, and it was different players and different things. But the order it kind of came out in, you were like, wow. So with that news, that means this roster is going to get built completely differently than a lot of us were expecting. They kept more in certain positions than they have in years, and it was very different. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's it wasn't a surprise per se that they went with Gabbert, because I think if there's one thing I know about Andy Reid is that he likes his veteran quarterback backups. But I think what was a little surprising was, at no point did it feel like I didn't even learn how to say his name.
Chris Oladokun.
Oladokun.
Or if you pronounce it how the other way I've heard it is Olodokun. But
Olodokun. Whatever. Chris Hadoken.
Chrisio. Yeah.
His name.
No, that's anime, I'm pretty sure, and that's not the same thing.
I'm pretty sure it's Street Fighter, but right? Hadoken. Right?
Street Fighter is anime is technically an animated animated, and I think Street Fighter is from Japan, so I think it really was anime to begin with. So anyway, go ahead. It's a separate conversation, but yes.
Where's the Kingdom Cast guys when you need them? I feel like one of them knows.
You could ask my brother, but I can't get a hold of him. So
yeah. So, all that to be said, I was really surprised that it went that way. And
he has to work too early in the morning.
Chain around. And it doesn't sound like, I know Bobby sent out a tweet earlier. We were talking about that before the show. Like, it's a little, who's actually tweeting here?
I think both is both an option on that one.
Who is actually tweeting off Bobby's
Shane's been around longer. I think Shane looked head and shoulders better. And at no point were we going, hey, this Chris guy might beat out Shane. Like we were talking about, Shane.
I think somebody else is signing him either to 50.
Yeah, I really think it does come down to. I mean, if they sign for the practice squad, he probably just he probably just gets signed by someone else if he is on the practice squad, anyways. So it's like it's probably kind of a mutual thing. Like we've kind of hit the cap with Shane, and we'll go let him flourish somewhere else and get an opportunity to actually be like a QB2, because I feel like it is kind of insulting for him to still be.
He could go to New England. They only have one QB on the roster right now. Everybody else got cut to the practice squad. So.
He really does have the talent to be a QB2, and I think it's just fair to him that he actually has a shot to earn it, and actually have a chance to compete. Because after he's lost, this battle this offseason, it's kind of. I think it's probably one of those things where it's like
it was a battle he was always fighting uphill because, as you guys mentioned, Andy is. This part of the reason the roster was so surprising is because they broke some of his typical tendencies. But one thing he's extraordinarily consistent about is veteran backup quarterback.
Yeah, and so that was always gonna be the result for him, even still. So I think it's good for both parties that he can kind of go find a different place to showcase his skills, But
as Kyle said, broke a lot of other tendencies this year, but
not that one.
Blaine was going to be the guy.
Exactly. So moving on to running back, which we'll kind of see the second somewhat surprise of the cuts. Only keeping 3 running backs on the initial roster with Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, with signing both Michael Pirine and Deneric Prince to the practice squad. Instead of keeping one or the other. We predicted that they'd probably keep Pirine, but I guess they, like we said, it's a little bit different how they're building the team this year. They've got a couple more spots at some positions. They got some at less positions. So that was a little bit surprising just to see that Michael Pirine also got cut. Prince was kind of the early candidate.
That's another structure thing.
Exactly.
We had them down for 7 players. We had them down for 7 roster spots through quarterback and running back, and they used 5.
5, yeah, which is
like when we did our 53s. That's going to change quite a bit, and And it did. I mean, you saw them lean into different positions, like on the other side of the ball, and kept an extra offensive lineman, which we'll get to. Yeah. So yeah, running backs. I'm not surprised the 3 names they did keep. I'm just surprised they kept 3.
Yeah. That's about how it goes, kind of. Really, there wasn't a surprise Clyde Edwards-Helaire trade. So that's about the only other shock that you could have seen from the running back room, really. So
they like him more than the rest of you do. Sorry, it's just the fact. It's going to be a fact. It'll be okay.
Who's the rest of us, huh?
Everybody I have seen talk about Clyde outside like 7 people that do this. Like, come on. Like, we know who. Everybody.
Tom, what is he talking about?
It's been me, Dan Harms, Charles Goldman, like 4 or 5 other people besides us that are like, look, y'all, Nate Taylor, Seth, like Clyde is on the team. He is.
I agree. That doesn't mean it's the right thing,
but it is, because he knows the offense. They actually are probably going to actually throw the ball to him, which is what we've been wanting them to do since they freaking drafted him this year.
Unless they throw it to
he was ready to, if I'm not mistaken, he was ready to run routes in the Super Bowl as a receiver if necessary at points. Like,
and then he was inactive.
It is what it is, but they've kept him around. They know what they're getting. He's consistent. When he's playing, he's playing. When he's hurt. But when he's playing, he's consistent.
And yeah, he is on the initial 53-man roster, so good for him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not rooting against him, because if he does well, he's doing well for the team and all that. I'm not holding out a lot of hope.
Yeah,
but I hope he's because it'd be nice. It would be nice, I think.
Yeah,
we've nothing else for him to at least have a season where he's able to put it together. Because
he and Jet.
Go
ahead.
I'm not trying to dog on the kid specifically. I just think he's had a bad string of injuries and health
injuries
things.
Are really the thing that derailed him. Yeah,
it's mostly just been injuries, and I can't.
The high ankle sprain, we've talked about it 100 times. The first high ankle sprain he got when he was with the Chiefs, he never got a step back after that. That extra burst that he had, the little bit that he had, never came back. Which it is what it is. But he's productive when he's on the field. When he's on the field, I said when he's on the field. I did not say all the time. I said when he's on the field. He's productive when he's on the field. They trust him that he knows the offense. They trust him now that he's pass block. Of all the things everybody's hated on that kid for, his pass blocking has improved drastically over the last couple of years. So they're consistent, and Jerick McKinnon and him seem to be basically like 2 peas in a pod, Bonnie and Clyde style boys. Like, they're always together.
I'm sure Jerick would get over it, but
yeah.
So moving on to the wide receiver.
That locker room is as tight as it is.
We've had a lot of conversations about Clyde. I think we can save the rest of them. But moving on to wide receiver here, it's another surprise. Not really a surprise, but a tendency break, as we've kind of talked about already. The first time in the Reed era. Yeah, first time in the Reed era that they kept 7 wide receivers. Everyone kind of who we predicted would make it, besides Amir Smith-Marset, who was traded to the Panthers for a conditional 7th round pick in 2 years for a great
boy.
Yeah, and then they signed Cornell Powell, and I think
that was the surprise to me. He made it to the practice squad.
The practice squad, yeah, and I think Nico Remigio will also.
He's on IR, I think, because
he's waived
with an injury waiver
on
designation.
IR unless they reach a settlement. But wide receiver room wasn't really wasn't too many surprises here. Good for Justin Ross to make the team.
There was none. Obviously. For me, there was none. There was no surprise. Amir Smith-Marset getting traded wasn't a surprise either. Like, none of that was a surprise.
I mean, it was pleasant. I mean, like, I didn't expect him to actually make the roster, so it was nice that they got something out of it.
I was maybe holding out hope for 8 wide receivers.
Yeah, no. It's a little too obvious.
Just 8 wide receivers. Just to do it,
But this is the deepest group front to back that Mahomes has had.
Very deep. Yeah, definitely.
There's not the top end talent that he's ever had, like the best top end talent, obviously, because there's no Tyreek Hill. But your floor is so much higher at positions 5, 6, and 7 versus 4, 5, and 6 in the past. Jesus.
In the pre-show, we were talking about how like basically pretty much all of these guys are actually going to get used in the offense, like from the get-go. Like it's a lot different. Where the couple of years you have like wide receiver 6 being Marcus Kemp, and he's just
they have packages. You know? They have packages. Brett already said it. Brett said it today in the press conference. Rashee Rice and Justin Ross have packages already, and of course they do. If you look at what their skill sets are, but
exactly. So
there also is a path for them to be
different ways. It's going to be.
You can see at the end of the year they just rotate platoons of wide receivers on and off the field.
Exactly. Just keep guys fresh out there, run a bunch of different routes and looks and stuff like that, and
just run teams into the ground from a route running perspective.
Justin Ross is going to.
Jesus Christ! Can we please be careful with not making the expectations for that dude?
They're already chiseling his bust for Hall of Fame for a Canton.
I know.
Come on,
I know.
His bust is halfway.
They might even be chiseling his package for a.
Arrowhead Live already put out if you can predict his number or his receptions and yardage, and it's like some of the numbers I've seen. It's like, guys,
1,900.
I saw 928 and like 12 touchdowns or something. I'm like, okay. Can we? How about
that's in the first 12 games?
How about like 400 or so and like 6 or 7 touches? How about that?
Especially with how deep this wide receiver room is. Seems like
they're going to throw the ball to everybody. That's the other part.
400 yards and call it a day. You know,
you're going to have like Travis Kelce with like 1,300 yards again, and then you're going to have everybody else somewhere between 1,000, 500 and 1,000, and most of them are going to be closer to 500 than they are 1,000.
Yeah, I'd honestly be surprised if anyone hits like over 600, 700 yards this season.
I think MVS is going to surprise some people because I think the deep ball connection to him is going to be better, and I think he's going to get to use it more because they have more talent underneath, so that's going to open up things a little bit. But he's probably the one that's closest to 1,000 besides... Unless Kadarius Toney stays healthy all year, and then all bets are off. Because then
that's a wild card right there. Yeah, it's always.
Then nobody knows what happens next. That could look scarily similar to a 2018 or 19
1,000 yards for you right here.
If he's healthy and ready to go.
Kadarius Toney. Yeah.
That would be the only thing I would say about the wide receiver room. This has the potential to be the most ridiculous room he's had, and it's the highest floor group he's had. That's where I'll go with
I think that there's that potential. So Pat operates best when he has multiple targets that he trusts. And so I think it's scary to think about, but this could be one of his more productive seasons. And this really could be
just won an MVP.
Since he's had
it still hits me that this guy is not even 30 yet.
He's not even bro.
Quarterback.
We have a couple of years till he hits 30. Like
28, I think. 28. Yeah.
It's getting
crazy time.
Like
it's a crazy time.
We're nearing the part where he gets to finally start his peak. And I know that some people are going to go, "What do you mean start his peak?"
Yeah. Watch this. Yeah.
When progression happens for a player, traditionally speaking, and especially when it comes to quarterback, they don't hit their peak and really, really start to understand the league and really, really start to understand their routine, what they want, their receiving groups, how they're doing, all this stuff until years like 6 or 7 or 8 in the league. You don't see a lot of guys that start that in year 2. Now, he's gotten into his what most people would consider the peak faster, but I also think there's a lot more room to go up for him than a lot of other people have had in the past.
You haven't even seen the behind the back pass yet. Like, come on.
He's doing the stuff on field is one thing.
Yeah.
It's the off-field stuff.
That's going to be
it's the off-field stuff. It's the mental stuff. It's the leadership stuff. It's the I run an additional training camp in Texas for my offense. That doesn't count for the league. That nobody has any control over. Like,
it's definitely starting to get some Peyton Manning type stuff, some Tom Brady-esque stuff where it's like he's literally just hosting workouts and like just knows all the receivers
with players they drafted later. Rashee Rice.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So, hey, by the way,
it's a good time for the wide receivers. Moving on to tight end, the tight end group. Not a ton of surprises.
Was really surprised that Travis Kelce kid made it.
Travis Kelce,
I just
big roster
imagine
shot.
How they did that.
Yeah, very surprised at that one. Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, and Blake Bell. all three tight ends from last year, minus Jody Fortson, of course, make it. Matt Bushman, Kendall Blanton, and Isaiah Gathings get cut. Bushman signed to the practice squad. I know that. So we have a potential fourth.
Watching Travis on the podcast with Kittles where he was talking about Jody and Jody then getting hurt made me sad, kind of like the Nazi Johnson thing did, which was just rough. But no, there's literally no surprises in the tight end room. That went exactly what we expected. Bushman, fine. Practice squad, great. My only thought there was that another tight end needy team comes and tries to yank, but at that, I mean, to put him on a 53-man, you're going to have to be really light in your tight end room at that point. He ends up back in Kansas City because he is on the practice squad. So, and I think isn't Blanton on it too?
I don't know. I don't know if they really want to bring Blanton back, but
I don't remember.
I know the only kind of notable thing out of the tight end room.
They brought in the other guy from. They brought in that Garrett Prince kid, who is another Prince that's on this roster now.
They did sign him from the Jags.
He's a tight end from the Jags.
Yeah, I did see that, but the only really notable thing that I thought might happen is they might cut Blake Bell and then bring him back the day later. Something that they've done with a couple other guys, but he made the roster, so that was good.
Once they did this with the quarterback and the running backs, I was Blake Bell made the team.
I mean, it's hard to predict that they were going to do that with those roster spots. I thought they'd cut it in different areas, but they cut it in quarterback and running back, so that made up for it.
I was like, well, as soon as I saw Shane Buechele's name on the not making the team list, I was like, well, Blake Bell made it because
he's going to be different. Yeah, exactly.
There's no chance he doesn't have 3 tight ends. None. 0. So,
especially with no fullback.
No fullback, no tight end, no extra quarterback, and you only kept 3 running backs? Dude, we're just hoarding roster spots for later? Like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Save them for later. Save them for all the defensive players you need.
Of course, and all the offensive
Save them for 10 offensive linemen.
Yeah, so we got 10 offensive linemen
on the same wavelength here.
A couple surprises. Me and Kyle talked about it last episode, how they might keep 3 backup offensive tackles, and they did. But they also kept 10 offensive line, which we didn't predict. So
that I didn't expect.
Obviously, I'll just run through them real quick. Donovan Smith, Joe Tooney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Jawan Taylor are your starters. And then we got Nick Allegretti, Prince Tega Winogo, Wanye Morris, Lucas Niang, and Mike Caliendo, which was kind of the big shocker, 10th guy in the group. And then they ended up cutting Darian Kennard and Austin Ryder, who I both brought back to the practice squad.
And Jason Godric.
Jason Godric, they also
is I believe he is the guy that counts for the international roster player exemption.
So
because and Jerome Carvin also ended up on the waived injured reserve waiver list, and he cleared waivers, so he went to the Chiefs injured list. So
yes,
cool.
So 10 offensive linemen, a little bit of a surprise.
Same thing with Remigio, which I forgot to mention with the wide receivers earlier. Sorry, Garrett.
Yes, that is true. Remigio was IR guy. So, the biggest shock, I think, was Caliendo even making the roster, but also him making it over Darian Kennard. Yeah.
With him keeping 9, when we talked about it on the podcast, I expected them to keep – I said they keep the 3 tackles and Allegretti to cover the inside, but I forgot Allegretti was banged up. Allegretti's nicked up. So they kept 10.
No pun intended for Nick.
That wasn't. Thank you, Tom. I didn't realize that was an accidental punness on my part. But so with Nick being not 100%, and them deciding to keep 10 linemen, it makes more sense as to why they kept 10 linemen because Nick's not 100%.
Yep.
And it makes more sense that they kept Caliendo over Kennard because Caliendo plays guard, center, guard. Kennard plays guard tackle, and they kept 3 tackles already. So you're not looking for extra help outside.
Yeah. And
that I think with Kennard, there was also just the reality that he wasn't.
I'll be honest. I'm kind of disappointed. I was a big fan of Darian Kennard when they got him in the 5th. I thought they should have taken him in the 4th. To be honest, Tom and I we talked about that on draft day that year. I thought he was a 4th rounder, not a 5th rounder, and I was kind of surprised. I was sad they didn't take him in the 4th. Turns out I was wrong about that. Good to know. And from getting him in the 5th, I was expecting him to do something similar to what not necessarily be Trey Smith, but be on that same development pathway, and be in that same mind and mold, because they had a similar. First of all, they have similar stories. They both didn't have fun as in college with whether it be health or whether it be playing time or any of that stuff. They both have backstories that weren't great from that sport. I think Trey's was health. I think Darian's was more family related and stuff like that. But you know, the same whole he getting slept on. He was an award winner for the SEC for one of their lineman awards. And then he goes in the 5th round, and Trey came in with a chip on his shoulder and this and that. And then Darian's interviews and all that, he portrayed that, and that's how he talked, and that's how he's focused, and that's how he acts. We never saw him develop really. And I'm not saying he's not working hard, but you never see that development from a guy that focused and that driven publicly. Yeah, it makes you wonder: is there limitations? Can he just not?
It's only his second year, to be fair.
Sure,
but yeah,
it's also a thing of they probably thought they could get him to the practice squad pretty easy. And we talked about it. I thought they could get both him and Callie into the practice squad with very little issue,
right?
If they wanted to. But with Allegretti banged up, you keep Caliendo on the roster because Allegretti's not full tilt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that I kind of forgot about in the preseason, but it did make sense because we saw Caliendo in there playing center in the last preseason game, and they were using Austin Ryder at left guard, and then I believe
which is why Garrett and I knew Austin Ryder was not making this roster.
Yeah, but Austin Ryder on the practice squad, you know, I think he'll probably just end his career as a Chief. Probably
that dude's gotta enjoy getting Super Bowl rings for just being.
It's like, all right,
just hanging out, really.
Yeah, and
he's like, hey, the one time I played, we got fucking wrecked. How about I don't play and you guys go win a ring?
He was a starter for the first one.
I know. I'm being
and the second one was. Yeah, he was actually
not his fault.
He was the only survivor of the.
The second one, he was out there going, "Who the fuck are all these guys?
Who are these guys?"
Yeah. Like, wait a minute.
Wait, why are you over there? You were over there. What the fuck is going on?
A little bit that season too, but yeah. Anyways, offensive line, 10 offensive linemen. You know. You keep
also
Prince
more
Tega.
of a statement on they don't want anything touching Patrick Mahomes. They kept more O linemen.
Exactly. Lucas Niang, good for him to make the roster. I thought
I'm happy for Lucas.
Yeah.
Everybody hates that dude. I don't get it. He's done nothing but do everything. He was starting last year till he got hurt. Okay. And then Andrew Wiley balled out, and that's what happens. But he was starting and he was decent last year until he got hurt. Now, the injury thing, same conversation we had about Clyde. Yada, yada. I get it. Guys, we got to stop getting mad at players for being injured. It's not necessarily like they're out here asking to get hurt, folks.
Yeah. And so you got Niang there. You got Wanya Morris.
I can assure you, Tom, Niang's not like, let me go ahead and get hip and knee surgery. Just sign me up for that one.
Are you sure that he's not out here trying to tear his patella?
Yeah. Also to see Prince Tega, obviously, I think he was pretty good.
That one.
But he's like their best left tackle depth, you know, like Wanya Morris is going to play kind of a swing tackle if he's really needed. He'll probably honestly be more of a reserve player, like we saw Darian Kennard was last year. But you got Prince Tega, who like they actually like at left tackle if you need to have it. So.
And I'll tell you what, they must like Niang at right tackle for backup because
that's what I think the thought probably is. Those two are the backup tackles, and then Wanya.
And then
like they did the same thing with Kennard last year, where he was on the active roster, but they didn't activate him for
many
games.
And I think honestly,
he's kind of a reserve guy who's on the.
It
active
leaves
roster.
you options. They give you options with that grouping of 10. It allows you flexibility behind your starters that you didn't have previously with this group. And Prince has been the guy they've been continuing to be like, no, we seem to kind of like him at left tackle. They did it his first year, and then they did a little more last year, and then this year he's been predominantly the backup at left tackle that I've noticed. The one that's jumped off the screen, the one that's done things where you're like, oh, he just mauled that dude. All right, cool.
Yep.
Like
he's I think working his way into that territory where he will be that swing tackle until somebody else poaches him, tries to make him a starter, and they regret it. But
we like 3rd round draft picks. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Yep. Yeah. We'll take it.
So moving on to the other side of the ball here. So we saw a couple good surprises. There was, let me try to add up real quick in my head here, 25 players on the offense. We have the 3 specialists, of course, that stayed the same. So that adds up to 28. And so you had
27 left on the back end.
Is that how? Okay, good math there. Yeah, so defensive
no,
line.
No.
Is it?
No.
Okay.
No, that's bad
Tom,
math. 25.
We need math here.
25, 25, and 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 25. Okay, we figured it out.
I was like, why did I say 27? That does not make any sense.
I believe you because I cannot do math.
It's
like
because
that.
they should have made it's because the NFL roster should honestly be 55 because 53 is just an arbitrary stupid number and we should be at rounded whole solid 5s and 10s that make sense. But
might as well just make it 60 at that point, yeah.
Seriously, honestly, they should. No, we don't need college football rosters, but the roster, the players don't necessarily want it because they don't want to cut up the pie as much with active roster players. The owners don't, but the problem is, here's the thing: they shouldn't have to. The numbers should increase with the number of players because the owners make plenty off of this nonsense. But hey,
so with all that being said, the defensive line, they kept 10 defensive linemen. As the initial came out, they had 10, and then they still have 10, but it's a little bit different. So they have George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Felix Anudike. I don't know why it's called
Felix Navidad.
Yeah, I'm just reading it for some reason. That was the way that I read it. Felix Anudike Uzama, Malik Herring, BJ Thompson, Neil Farrell Jr., Derek Nadi, Tershawn Wharton, and Keandre Coburn, and not Matt Dickerson anymore. So I don't even, is this really add up to 10?
Well, so Matt Dickerson just happened today. So Matt was part of the 53, and then Matt was cut today, and then Matt was signed to the practice squad today, which I didn't know you could do that, but
yes,
whatever.
Okay, so actually, Matt Dickerson was. So there's actually only 9 defensive linemen, as I'd be allowed to, because they signed Dion Rush to fill that spot. That's the corresponding move right there.
So they've got that.
They're using the list from our guy Charles Goldman at A to Z Sports over there.
Yes.
When he didn't have it quite updated, so no Matt Dickerson. There's 9, and then there's Anyways,
I'll say there was a surprise, at least one surprise for me on the D line. I thought Danny Shelton had done enough to lock up a roster spot. I thought for sure he was on the roster.
Yeah,
he did the Malik Herring thing.
Practice squad. So Danny Shelton did,
which is different than what he originally stated because he originally was not interested in practice squad assignments this year, from my understanding. However, we talked about Kando and Herring being a coin flip. They went with Herring. I also thought they could go with neither, but they're so short at DNs right now. They had to basically pick one, I think, is kind of the way that went.
Yeah.
And so they went with Malik Herring. Are we surprised at all that they traded with the Raiders? Let me rephrase that.
A little bit.
I'm surprised they traded with the Raiders. I wonder if the conversation went like this. Brett was like, yeah, deal. Hey, don't say anything to Clark until like after we turn the paperwork in on this one. And then we'll just kind of, hey, by the way, we picked up a defensive player. Oh, yeah, from who? Oh, Vegas, and hope he forgets that it's the Raiders and because they're supposed to be in Oakland.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the All-Star game spot. Yeah.
But so picked up a Pro Bowler? Sweet.
Yeah. Nice, yeah. So for that, for those who don't know, Neil Farrell Jr., defensive tackle out of LSU, the Raiders. He was a 5th-round pick last year for the Raiders. 4th-round pick. I think it was a 4th-round pick for the Raiders last year.
LSU.
Out of LSU, 6'4",
325 is what he's listed at, I believe.
Bigger guy. I think Brett Veach mentioned he has inside-out versatility. Kind of a defensive tackle, maybe not a nose tackle type, but big guy. Space, good in the run.
They are so weird on this defensive line group right now.
Yeah, pretty weird. A little bit weird.
I mean, your edges all look like the same size profile, essentially.
Like
every
BJ
dude
Thompson.
is the same except for BJ Thompson.
Yeah.
And then your defensive tackles, hell, I think Brett Veach called Neil a defensive end today.
Which
I think he did.
I don't, probably just him misspeaking.
Probably Freudian slip. But then you've got Keandre Coburn and Tershawn Wharton and Derek Nadi in there. They've got, it's an interesting group. We're going to talk about it a little bit, I'm sure, here after we finish this 53. But they're going to do some different things with the defensive formation and groupings this year, especially to start with.
Yeah, especially not having Chris Jones there, you might have to not having
which we'll talk about.
There. Yeah, we're not having yet.
Yeah,
he was placed on the So the reason we didn't mention Chris Jones in that initial 9 guys because they put him on the reserve did not report list, so he does not count for the active roster.
Mr. Omenihu is on the reserve suspended list.
Exactly. So that's 2 guys that
he doesn't count.
Be back at least some point during the season, So you got to keep that in mind. One of the bigger, I guess, surprises was cutting Joshua Kando and opting also to not bring him back on the practice squad. Former fourth round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Former 4th rounder, yeah. So picked up a 4th rounder, got rid of a 4th rounder.
That is true. Yeah, they did trade one for the other. So Joshua Kando, good athlete, but never just kind of figured it out in his couple years. He's been in
He's
KC.
an athlete. I don't know what else to tell you he is, but that was what we said about him when he came in. So
if Joe Cullen can't get anything out of him, I don't know if anyone else will, but good luck to him, Phil Hoskins obviously was cut as well.
I think the team tries just because his athletic profile is just so damn freaky. You're like, well, maybe it was something weird where there was a scheme problem.
Honestly, probably the Raiders might just take him back up. The Raiders just might be like, oh, athletic defensive end. I'll take him. Yeah.
The Raiders might go, oh, he was on the Chiefs. He's probably good.
Yeah. And so Truman Jones goes back on the practice squad. Danny Shelton's still on the practice squad, which
I was very happy to see Truman Jones make it to the practice squad. I was not positive he was going to or how that was going to go. So I'm happy he's back.
Yeah,
good. He's from Harvard.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's I think there's potential there. I think a little more time in the kiln with Potter Clay, with Potter Mulder and Clay artist Cullen, and we will.
Yeah, it gives me some Tim Ward vibes with him, kind of small.
Yeah, we'll see where.
I like that. I don't hate that comparison.
Not bad. Tim Ward, I think, is dominating XFL right now or something. So
I agree with that, Tom. That's where I was like, I don't hate it. I think he's got more athletic upside, and he's more dynamic athletically than Tim was. Granted, Tim left Kansas City and got away from the Sutton project and a couple of the other things, and he turned out just fine. So
he was a starter for the Jets for I think like 2 games, and then he got hurt, and then he's a starter for like the Michigan Panthers in the USFL. So
they'll be shuffling guys around with the defensive line. And
definitely. I expect to see a lot more defensive line moves, obviously, especially with
they're going to use some linebackers on the pass rush because I don't know how they can't. They kept 6 guys.
I mean, they got to be creative, right? And
they kept 6. They kept 6.
They got some younger guys up front who are going to have to develop. I think it'll be really interesting. I think George Karlaftis, his development year 2 is going to be
huge.
Really
George is your starting defensive end. Like when you put the defensive depth chart out on the end, he's 1.
Yeah, but also like with Chris Jones' situation being what it is, and we expect that to change hopefully soon. There is this reality that like George is like the vet of that group.
Yeah,
he's suspended. George is in year 2. That's the guy who knows the system and who's
Mike Dana is in that room.
I know that's almost blasphemous to say, but
Mike Dana, from that perspective, is more seasoned. However, the expectations for George are to be a 1 as a defensive end. That's his expectations at this point.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that's the expectation, like from everybody across, like.
They didn't really seem to care that they didn't have anybody else at defensive end other than that. They looked at this defensive end group and went, "No, we're cool."
Yeah,
they don't care.
Make some additions. They still might re-sign Carlos Dunlap. That's been floated around a little bit, but still, George is going to be.
We'll see him right about the same time we see Charles Omenihu if they do that deal. But that's fine.
Significant amount of snaps for George Karlaftis this season. Expect
Carlos, stay in shape. We'll call you. We'll have you in around week 6 to get you ready to go by week 9. Cool.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it works out.
So linebacker, 6 linebackers, which is probably the biggest shock. Me and Kyle last episode predicted 4.
I even gave them 5 when I made my adjustments to the depth chart I put out individually, and that still wasn't enough because they just had to give Ryan Tracy what he wanted.
Yeah, and there's a couple shocks. So I'll read them off: Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquill, Willie Gay Jr., Leo Chenal, Cam Jones, and Jack Cochran. Cam Jones probably being the biggest shock as a 6th linebacker. big special teams guy that I actually noticed this guy a lot flashing on kickoff returns. Like he wears number 44, and I'm like almost every kickoff return, I think I saw him like.
You know how we talk about Dave Toub and his bottom of the roster influence at points.
That is
Cam Jones. I got bit by the Dave Toub bottom of the roster influence this year on the projections because the only reason that Cam Jones is on this roster is what Garrett just said.
Yep.
Every time you looked at special teams tape, all you saw was Cam Jones on it.
Yeah,
that's what happened
out there.
And that's what you got to do to earn a roster spot in this league at the bottom end of this league, especially in Kansas City. And Cam Jones did it. And when they did put him out, I guarantee you it went something like this. Dave looked over at Spags and went, "You better figure out some way to use him because he's going to be on the roster, dog. So do something with him." And Spags is like, "Serious? All right, let's try this." And they put him in some different scenarios, and he looked more than capable of surviving in those scenarios. I'm curious to see how this goes. He's a guy that I didn't think had a shot at making this roster strictly based on the fact that I didn't think there was any way in earth they were keeping 6 freaking linebackers. But
I couldn't have even told you his name.
Here
honestly.
We are.
From the last episode, I don't even think we mentioned his name. I mean, I saw the number 44 out there.
I did. I rolled through him because I just didn't think no matter what he did on special teams was going to be enough to get him on this roster.
The name and the number if you would have held against me.
And listen, once you're forced to play a defensive tackle at linebacker, all respect to our boys Colin Saunders, like you don't want to be in that situation again.
Yeah,
so you're a little careful. From that point on.
And so there were a couple. I mean, I also think like we kind of talked about earlier with the wide receivers, how like Dave Toub always had that last wide receiver be like a special teams guy. Now you don't really have that, so you have an extra linebacker in Cam Jones to kind of supplement, and also no fullback. I mean,
and Leo's banged up, so
you lose 2 key special teamers and not having a fullback and a wide receiver who does special teams. Really, I mean, they'll have wide receivers on special teams.
And like you also mentioned, Leo played special teams last year. Leo's banged up a little bit this year on this right now.
Leo got banged up in the last preseason game, so something to look at. But and then Jack Cochran, who they're kind of another special teams guy, also potential like Mike linebacker in a pinch type guy if you need him. So
he's almost purely special teams at this point. What they use him for, but yes.
Well, Darius Harris was at one point too, and then he started games. So it's always the next man up, and they at least prepare guys for having that role.
And then we get to the other rooms that has the surprise in it.
And then 6 cornerbacks is what we're tallied at.
We ended up with now. Yeah, so the original was 5. The original
was 5, and then they ended up trading out. Well, not trading, but cut Matt Dickerson and claimed David Rush.
I believe it's Darius, right, Tom?
Deneric Rush?
Darius Rush, yes.
So they started with L'Jarius Sneed. They started with Sneed, McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Josh Williams, and Nick Jones.
Nick Jones was the 5th and final guy on the initial 53.
Now
cutting Echo, Boydo, DiCaprio Boodle, Khalif
Hasil is the one who did not clear waivers, who I actually had on my 53 that I edited, that did not make it over Nick Jones, but did get claimed by the Cleveland Browns. So
damn Brownies.
Khalif got signed.
Grabbing
Darius
Rush.
Yeah, David Rush, whatever his name is.
Really interesting that he was even available because he was drafted this year. He's a 5th round draft pick this year. Has a really, really good athletic profile.
Where do you go to college at? Stanford?
South Carolina. So there's some things that you want to see.
Almost.
Learn
the S were the same, Garrett.
Same color, too. They're like a dark red.
Sure. Garrett, you believe what you want.
South Carolina, maroon. Stanford,
maroon,
cardinal
dark
red.
What's the difference?
Cardinal red. A lot of purple in that.
They both probably lost to the Trojans last year, so it doesn't matter. And also, USC is the original USC, Southern California. Anyways. Echo Boydo makes it back to the practice squad. Did they sign DiCaprio Boodle to the practice squad? I don't know if I saw that or not.
I don't think they did.
I don't know.
No.
That's what happens when you try to fight Travis Kelce in training camp. Or he tries to fight him. I'm not really sure who were blaming
But
them.
yeah, Echo Boydo makes it back. That was another guy who we talked about last episode.
They also got Reese Taylor back.
Yes, Reese Taylor as well. He was the guy who speared DTR in the third preseason game,
which was pretty cool.
Literally a la Roman Reigns and Edge.
Oh God, that was such a pretty textbook spear.
So yeah,
too.
DB room obviously, and
spear in the good way. He did not use the crown of his helmet. He did not do anything.
Fully legal, all legal, very legal.
He used his finisher slot, hit him with the
didn't land with his full body weight on the quarterback. It was a beautiful hit.
I don't know how he could have, since he damn near broke him in half.
Yeah, oh my God, he's broken in half.
Why? Who needs one quarterback when you can have two halves of one quarterback?
Exactly. So out of all these, out of the 6 cornerbacks that ended up making it, I think one notable piece of news: L'Jarius Sneed. Brett Veach talked about him in the press conference today. They expect him to be good for Week 1, even though we haven't seen any action of him yet this entire offseason.
So I guess we should do that. Brett spoke today to the media.
Yes.
And in that conversation, he said
a lot was said.
Barring Rick and co changing anything, the expectation is that every person on the 53-man roster as it currently sits is expected to play against Detroit and be on the practice field this week.
Yep.
Yeah,
everybody.
So
that's Nick Jones. That's
Tony.
Nick Jones. That's Turk Wharton. That's Kadarius Toney. That's L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah.
That's Jack Cochran, or not Cochran. That's Leo Chenal. That's everybody that's supposedly banged up.
Yeah. So that's very good news to hear, especially with L'Jarius, having not seen them all.
And Kadarius, the rhyming name twins. Let's call them that, I guess, at this point.
Exactly. So L'Jarius and Kadarius hopefully will be good to go. Moving on to
Tom.
Oh, yeah.
Darius Rush.
Darius Rush.
He's on the 53 because they claimed him from the Colts.
Dog meter.
Yes.
So, what can we expect from... Now, I don't expect it in Detroit necessarily, because that would be a tough ask. But...
So he's going to be a guy who...
I've heard some comparisons, but I'm curious.
I'm not going to pretend like I was like, oh, this kid is the best thing ever, as he's coming out, because it wasn't. I thought he was going to go a little bit higher than the 5th round, probably maybe a 4th or even a late 3rd round guy, just because his athletic testing was really good. So he has the size and the skill to play outside, and I think that's ideally where you project him. So he would be like the backup to Jalen Watson, Josh Williams, that kind of position, that number 2.
An outside corner.
Definitely more of a boundary guy. I don't think he plays inside. I just don't think he has those instincts, the short area quickness. But definitely a intriguing pickup just from the perspective of his athletic profile, and he played decent in college, was a solid starter. It's going to be about the nuance of the game, but if there's somebody who can teach him that, it's Steve Spagnuolo and that crew. And so it's a lot of his stuff is more mental than anything, and so sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. But he has physically, he's got everything you want.
He was at the Senior Bowl. He was a standout there. Stampede Blue described him as a surprise cut. Turns out he actually had a couple injuries so far. Had a hamstring injury in training camp and a hip injury in week 2 of preseason. So, like Kyle said, probably not going to see him much the first couple of games, but it's kind of more of a long-term project.
And
very athletic cornerback.
He may end up in that position where he has a injury at some point, and then all of a sudden he's on IR for a while.
Yeah, and then just have
we'll see him next year.
Development project for Brett Veach, because he loves those things. So.
Very much a possibility there.
So the cornerback room shaped out. Nothing too crazy. A surprise.
Surprise. More corners.
Yes, exactly.
I am a little surprised they ended up with 6 over and only 4 safeties, but
because
I think that's just the product of the guys.
4 safeties is what they ended up keeping with Justin Reed, Brian Cook, Mike Edwards, and Shamari Connor.
That just tells you how how well Shamari Connor has played all through camp, all through the preseason, because he took Deion Bush's roster spot, frankly, and I'm just being honest.
Garrett's gone down a wormhole.
Camera's down. I don't hear him anymore. We'll find out what's going on with Garrett. He's mining. He's in the mine shaft. It's very dark in there. He's alive.
Garrett, can you hear us?
Shamari Connor took Deion Bush's roster. Like we talked, Isaiah talked about taking a grown man's roster spot last year. Well, Shamari Connor took a grown man's roster spot this year. Because Deion Bush not being on this team is one surprising strictly because I thought he was making it regardless. I thought they were going with 5 safeties. Just based on his special teams and everything. And he seemed to have developed a little bit more in the safety play in the preseason, at least a little bit. Not in so much in the last game, but in the first 2 games. So,
yeah.
And then they cut him. And it's because Shamari Connor made them cut him. Like, that's the gist of how a lot of this stuff at the bottom of this roster works. These guys determine a lot of this stuff for the team.
Yeah.
And that's where Shamari Connor just said, yeah, that'll be my job, please. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. And like I said for a while, Shamari Connor's that guy that I've got. Like, he's my guy this year. The one I'm going to back and
get the jersey. Break out your old Larry Johnson jerseys and swap the name out.
Sharpie over it.
Hey, when Larry was here, he was very good.
I had a Larry Johnson jersey, Kyle.
I still do.
I know.
Yeah, Larry Johnson was my first Chiefs jersey.
I've moved Larry Johnson's jersey over into the far edge of the closet where it's not allowed to be touched because every time I've touched that jersey in the last 10 years, something bad has happened, so I don't touch it anymore. But it's there.
Yeah. Mine's a kid size, so I can't. But
it sits over in the corner, right where it goes.
First, and then it was Larry Johnson. Pretty cool. But yeah,
we won't. Mine was Elvis freaking Gerbach, so you guys lucky.
There you go. Banger, absolute banger. But yeah, 4 safeties. Deion Bush back on the practice squad. Might see some more moves there potentially. Who knows? As more guys come available, but I think they got a pretty solid set of guys there. So with that is the entire 53-man roster, that initial 53-man roster, of course, that ended up making it with obviously Harrison Butker, Tommy Townsend, and James Winchester rounding out special teams there.
Yes, all 3 of the givens. So here's the deal. We'll just quickly cover the practice squad. There's going to be 19 names that I'm going to read you, but only 16 spots on the practice squad, so I expect additional moves to come when guys clear physicals that they've claimed that aren't showing up on their roster list yet. Their current list is Reese Taylor, Deion Bush, and Danny Shelton, Austin Ryder, Jason Godric, which is the exemption player, Matt Bushman, Deneric Prince, Cornell Powell, LaMichael Pirine, Cole Christensen, Echo Boydo. Montrell Washington is a wide receiver that they picked up out of somewhere.
Yeah, he's one of the ones that hasn't officially happened because of the physical. But yeah, that'll be a corresponding move probably made after that.
Chris Oladokun or Oladokin or any of the other 8 pronunciations anybody wants to use.
Chrissy O. Come on, Chrissy O.
Garrett Prince, tight end from Jacksonville. They brought him over. And then Keith Taylor is a corner. Chris Williams, Matt Dickerson, Darian Kennard, and Truman Jones round out your group. Now, they will have 17 on their practice squad because of the international player exemption for Mr. Godric there. So that wraps that up. Brett Veach's press conference today, boys. That's just the rest of that. I mean, any final thoughts on the 53 there?
Just missing one Chris Jones.
Yep, that's the biggest thing to still be had.
So like I said, Brett Veach's press conference today, guys.
Let's call it a transition.
That's a sick transition. Yeah, so Brett Veach was asked about it today in his press conference about Chris Jones. He reported that there has been communication the past couple of days with Chris and his team.
More conversation.
Yeah, more conversation than there was, which there was a report that there was no conversation, the past couple weeks. So past 2 days, Brett Veach said there has been communication.
There was an Andy Reid said there hadn't been communication at some point. Now, again, whether Andy hasn't been in communication with him or whether the team hasn't. That's a
or
separate
Andy was
thing.
just tired of being asked questions about something that he doesn't deal with.
Yeah,
Or
he's like,
and
"I don't
Andy
know, I haven't heard
Andy
anything."
said, no. Or that was
Yeah.
Andy's way of saying, "Hey, Chris, this is me communicating with you, even though we haven't talked. I haven't talked to you. Where the are you?" And
Exactly.
the same
So-
when Patrick said, "Yeah, I mean, we expected it to kind of be done by now."
It's like,
We're
come on,
still
bro.
with him.
Brett Veach came out and said that he's very hopeful and expects Chris Jones to be out
Bro,
there.
Brett was grinning like a
one.
Cheshire cat who knew he had something in the back that he couldn't
Yeah, a
show
little
or
bit,
tell
man.
anybody.
I thought it was a
And
little bit.
then wanted to move on really fast after he flashed the smile and wanted to continue with the conversation. He was then pressed.
Yeah.
He was follow-up questioned, and it was basically towards a deal or towards just him being here. Do you think he's going to show up without a deal? And Brett said, "Well, geez,
We're working on getting
those conversations are private, and I'm gonna keep them that way." As he smiled and grinned and looked the other way, like, "Look, man, there's deadlines, and deadlines make deals, and Chris knows that
I don't know if this
the
gonna
game
make a
checks
deal.
are gonna start disappearing. He knows that if those game checks start disappearing, that the franchise tag for next year becomes a lot more of an option, especially because the Chiefs have a bunch of cap space next year, and that's probably going up a considerable amount. So they can probably still operate and do their dance even with him franchise tagged. It's getting to the point where he's probably pretty frustrated, to the point where he wants to be there for opening night with Detroit. He wants to be
gotten to the point
involved.
where it doesn't make sense for him to still sit out. It's like,
So
what are we doing
I
here?
think we're getting to, and I think Brett knows, and then, to follow up, and this is where the Chris Jones conversation goes from the Brett Veach stuff. You heard Brett talk about it today. You saw the mannerisms and the reactions and the whatnot. And then, like an hour and a half later, Chris puts out a freaking Instagram post of him on the sideline in Vegas, in Chiefs gear, staring
Sitting
forward
down.
in one of his.
Sitting down.
So they're talking. Things are occurring now.
Yeah.
There's movement.
I guess.
Deadlines make deals. I know Garrett wants to just sit here and moan and groan and
Yeah.
pessimistic in my ear, because Garrett has done this now for an hour to me, even in the pre-show. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
We've had our hopes up though.
But
There
there has always been a significant, because
know.
he doesn't have any leverage with them on the cap right now. It doesn't
Yeah.
affect him. With him on the non-report list, the salary cap doesn't count. None of that stuff is affecting them any. This doesn't harm them, and it's just going to start taking money out of his wallet. I'm publicly discussed that I think that his agents mismanaged this because he's their only bell cow, and I also think that they probably thought that Quinnen Williams and Jeffrey Simmons and a couple of these other guys were going to get more than what they got, because I don't think they thought the cap out on the years was going to be 24.5, and I don't think they thought it was going to be that low. That's a huge gap that they now have to bridge to try to get to that number. So there's been some little things, but the progress, the actual movement, the actual conversations occurring, the actual things transpiring, there's deadlines, and we'll see if the deadline makes the deal. I think there's more of a chance
I hope so.
that it gets done than it doesn't.
I sure do hope so, and I am very hopeful that Chris is out there week one. I want to see Chris Jones out there.
I don't know that he'll play full snaps week one.
With that being said,
yes.
I am not convinced Chris Jones is going to be out there week one. I just feel like this whole situation has got.
Garrett's convinced we're trading him for a bag of potato chips because he's not going to be on the team by week 8.
I'm not
right?
Hold on. Let Garrett.
Let me get. I just let you talk for like 4 minutes straight, bro. Come on, let me get something in. All right. I'm not convinced because listen, this entire process has just been weird, and it feels like at some point it became less about the money and more about the respect, right? And it feels like, I mean, I just don't understand why he wouldn't have came back already. There's been a couple of deadlines. We thought he was going to be back for the first preseason game, second, third.
I'll bite. What's the respect issue that they've? What have they done to disrespect him?
Offering him
in any public facet. What have they done to disrespect him?
Public facet? I don't know.
None.
It's all,
Zero.
It's all contract things. Yeah, that's the thing.
There's been that's not technically true because there's been some other things done from the other side that aren't that method.
I don't know. Anyways,
you wanted to talk respect, and there's no evidence of any respect issues. So Tom, I'm just confused as to where your respect concern comes from.
Yeah. Any thoughts about it, Tom?
I agree. I think that it's something that we don't understand. Like, I don't think it's that the Chiefs are being disrespectful. I think that it's that, like, when you're at that level of competition, that there's a status, that there is a we're not going to like it because we're all individual, like, people who aren't millionaires, and so we have the same, like, position of, like, dude, just take the $35 million or $25 million, whatever. It's $1 million. Take the money, right? Any one of us would jump through lots of hoops for that. But I think and just putting myself in those shoes, when you're as good as he is and have produced like you want to be acknowledged, right? There's a status, and so again, that's where there's a disconnect, I think, from most fans and most regular people, because I personally don't get it. If somebody said, "Hey, I'll give you $20 million if you," and you pretty much you don't have to finish that sentence, I'll do it. So if you're out there with $20 million and want me to do something, slide in the DMs. But I think that when you're talking about gotcha, Kyle. So when you're talking about a professional athlete and the status, I think I hear, like, Garrett, what you're saying is, like, it's not necessarily even just like that the Chiefs have been disrespectful, but that Chris wants the respect of being in the same conversation pay-wise as Aaron Donald. And I think the Chiefs are going, hey, we want to pay you above all these other people. We're not paying you like Aaron Donald, because do you see the Rams roster right now? Do you see how they're doing? We want to stay competitive. And so it's not that it's meant to be disrespectful to Chris, but I think that there's a part of it that is, like I said, goes back to that status. It's the same way. It's the same. What was it? Who was the guy that just this year? Was it Orlando Brown? Somebody, they were talking about, the wide receivers last year with Tyreek Hill. Like, they were talking about, they signed this deal, and it's the most average per, the highest AAV of any position, anybody at that position. That's what they want. That's what every NFL player wants. They just want to be the top of the chart in some category that's relevant, makes the agents looks good. I don't say every NFL player, because obviously
99% of them, yes, because it's a business.
Yeah, and there's pride on the line, right? And that's part of it. So I don't think that the Chiefs are being disrespectful. I would say that Chris is asking, like, has attached his sense of pride to that, whatever that
to the AVV or to the guaranteed, because here's the thing that I don't understand when we're talking about the respect side of it. Guaranteed money is traditionally what determines respect for players. That's what they view as their respect level, because that's how much money they make, no matter whether they show up or not. That money is written into the check. This is what you think I'm worth, guaranteed. The AVV thing is traditionally an agent problem. Now, if you're telling me that them not offering him a certain amount of guaranteed money is disrespectful, I guess I can get along with that, because that's how the player traditionally measures that. But measuring, and again, the other comment would be the Chiefs have stated multiple times they have no real issues with keep getting him paid and getting him into that conversation of the top paid players at that position, the top guys at that position. The Aaron Donald contract, as we've talked about on this show about 1,000 times, is the Deshaun Watson deal. It's the absolute doesn't make any sense exception to a rule that should have never been done, but was done because the team did something insane.
Yeah.
I guess if in that instance, was Baltimore disrespecting Lamar Jackson and every other team disrespecting that guy by not paying them the Deshaun Watson deal? Because if that's the measuring stick, then everybody's getting disrespected, and I don't get how that's a possible thing.
And like I said, I don't.
That was my only issue with it being with the respect being the concern, is I don't know how it's a respect problem when those are the parameters that have basically been laid out by both sides.
Yeah, well, I think that's where we can get caught up almost in the semantics of the term, like respect, because I think it's a lot less about and like disrespect. I don't think the Chiefs are like it would be disrespectful.
They're not doing him like they did Justin Houston, right? Like this isn't Scott Pioli to Justin Houston.
Yeah, it wasn't like that. What I'm saying is it's about that status and about where. And I don't know if you talk AAV or guaranteed money or whatever. And it might be like you said. Are the Chiefs willing to make him? Are they willing to put in a funny money deal where he can say, I'm the highest paid, on average per year, like some people do. And then they're like, yeah, at the end of that deal, you have like 1 year that's like $50 million, but only like $2 is guaranteed. But you could say on average, you make the, highest. Like, is that what you're going to do? Or is it, like you said, the guaranteed? We don't know the details of all that, not until they announce a deal. But
I guess that's where I was lost. I don't know what you're defining as respect. I guess I probably should have worded that different because it's not like they're Jim Irsay out there saying that if the league ends and Jonathan Taylor's gone and he dies, that the league's just going to keep like that's not. There's not anything treatment wise like that. Like that's disrespectful. That's some crazy ass like what are you nuts? Disrespect type stuff. That for me is where I was like I'm not getting where you're coming from, Garrett. So I apologize if I was aggressive in that response, but I didn't understand what you were saying because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I was going to try to explain it, but then I couldn't. So it's cool though. We got to the end point, I think.
Which is like I said, it comes back to this status that's attached to being in that realm of I'm the highest paid player, or I'm the largest guaranteed contract, or everybody wants to have the biggest something.
Well, we know he's got the biggest something. It fell out in his pro day. So.
It was a combine.
Whatever. It was on national television, whichever way it was.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Sorry, Scout's eating something. I'm not sure what it is. Hey, what do you got? Oh, it's your foot. Never mind.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
It is. I mean, we always have the pet joins in the show, but
yeah.
Like I said, I think it's more probable with the deadlines being as close as they are and Chris being aware of what the next steps are, because as Garrett said to begin with on his initial point was it doesn't make sense for him to not be here at this point. It doesn't benefit anybody at all. Like you're not winning anymore against the team. Like there's no way that the other way I heard it put today was, I mean, he's kind of betting on his other defenders to be trash while he's gone in a certain way, which at that point, and this is another part of the conversation, guys respect you, get your money, do your thing, make sure you get your deal. But when you start either inadvertently, questioning their ability without you or openly questioning their ability, some defenders we've seen openly do it. He's at least not said that publicly on his Twitter account, so that's good. But that's a big deal in locker rooms, especially when that dude's supposed to be your leader. So it gets to a slippery slope point where eventually what is it makes sense to keep doing this point for him?
Yeah. I think there's a lot to lose. And a
lot of it's on his side, and it's because of the CBA. It's fucking crazy.
Think personally, that I would agree with Garrett again that there's some of that it's pride and respect, right? Like he feels, I don't know, I can't speak for him and say that he feels disrespected or.
So is this
whatever.
Because they didn't bring Frank back, or where are we? Like where did the disrespect come from? Is my
no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's more to it than just logical thinking. In fact,
there has to be at this point because logical thinking dictates he signed like a week and a half ago.
Yeah, because I hope that his agent. Yeah, I think that, like I said, that goes back to that status, that wanting to accomplish a certain agenda with the contract.
I think it seems like he's just trying to prove a point still. It's like at this point he's just proving a point that he should be the highest, and it's certainly a stance. It certainly is.
And he's going to be the highest paid out of any defensive tackle that is paid on a normal wage scale.
Yeah, not named Aaron Donald.
Yeah,
but again, that's where and putting that in the context, if Aaron Donald didn't exist, Chris Jones would be. I mean, I'll say it this way: the gap between Aaron Donald and Chris Jones is, as of, I would say, this last season, maybe the season before that, is smaller than the gap between Chris Jones and whoever you want to put
at
as
2
your
or at
third
3.
tackle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
But you're also in that scenario, and this is the part I think that a lot of fans are struggling with, and I think probably his agents bumbled to begin with. Aaron Donald doesn't exist for all intents and purposes of the conversations. So when if he doesn't exist and you're doing this contract and the normal AVV is 24.5 and the normal guaranteed for the next highest guy is 67, you're going to 25.5, 26 and 70, 71, not 30.5 and 80. That's not the same deal.
You brought up Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson. Do you not remember the Baltimore Ravens throwing a fit when Deshaun Watson got his deal? And
I do.
Happened.
I do indeed. They
so,
knew.
So your point is valid, right? Logically, we look at it and we go, "Hey, that's an outlier, right? We can't really factor that in." And Chris is looking at it going, and his agents, especially, are going, "No, I think we should factor that one in because that's a lot of money."
And that all makes sense until you've paid $5 million that you were gonna get back to them, and they're not giving you that deal.
Yeah, no, and like I said,
yeah,
that's I never. So I think the tweet,
and I hate it for the players. People think I'm on the owner's side in this. I hate it for the players, but it's their own fault to an extent because the reason that they're forced into this scenario is that stupid ass CBA they agreed to, so they could get wheat. Like, there's no way on earth they should have allowed. You can't hold out hardly anymore. First of all, we already know about the $50,000 fines every single day, automatically given if you're not a rookie.
That can't be rescinded by the team.
That can't be rescinded by the team. And then, if you do hold out into the season, their salary cap is completely unaffected because of it. So you have no leverage there. They have their roster limit isn't affected by it because you've moved you completely off the roster and it affects nothing. Yep. And they can fine you game checks up to multiple weeks after you report, even once you're there. I think they have 2 weeks after he reports to still withhold additional game checks if they so chose to.
Yeah,
there's some.
I think that there's.
Put them on
it's such a poison pill for any, and this isn't Chris specific. It's league wide with the big guys, but it's such a poison pill for the big guys to get paid.
Yeah. It definitely seems like at this point, like Chris has lost most of his leverage, and I think the only leverage he literally has left is sitting out games, which is why I'm still kind of not hopeful to see him or not expectant to see him week 1, because like Kyle said earlier, he's kind of banking on like the rest of the D line getting their face kicked in. The Chiefs are like, okay, we need this guy even more now, and I'm not sure how well that strategy is going to work out, but it's literally like his only piece of leverage that he has left. Everything else
sucks because he doesn't want to do that to his teammates. He doesn't want to be like, well, you guys suck without me. Like, that's not what he's wanting to do.
See if he's like, if he's really,
he's not what. From everything we know about Chris Jones as a person, there's 0% of me that believes he wants to actively alienate his teammates.
Yeah, I mean, the
0%.
The logical thing says, he'll have some human emotion in it and come in week 1 and help out his team. But like you said,
humans are not always logical.
Yeah,
they are always emotional.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be something to monitor as we go through this next week before the first game, Thursday Night Football. We will definitely be back before then, at least once, to talk. The first actual football game being.
If you're in the camp of wanting him for the Detroit game, you want him here by Friday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think Nate Taylor said if he's not in the building by Sunday, he's not going to go on Thursday. Yeah. So that will be a situation to monitor. Thank you all so much to listening and watching this one. If you are just listening, you can watch us over on YouTube, the Kingdom Says podcast over there, Kingdom Says Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff.
All the places.
Yep. Even X. We're gonna have to update this the little logo beneath Tom. Have the X.
Good Lord.
Twitter. Because that thing is dead.
Even though it still says Twitter when you pull it up on any of the apps or any of your desktops or anything.
I've actually seen a couple people linking it. It says like x.com, and then it's like it just looks weird. Looks like
it's so goofy.
So But yeah, thank you all so much for tuning into this one. Be sure to check us out on all of our platforms. Follow us along as we get looking forward to the first regular season game of the 2023 Chiefs season.
7 days away.
7 days from the time you listen to this. So it's going to be a good one. Be sure to tune in. We will see you guys in the next episode of the Kingdom Says podcast.